How could people with so little feel so steady inside? In 1940s America, material poverty was common, but emotional collapse was not. To modernize, this feels almost impossible to understand. The country was emerging from the Great Depression, standing on the edge of World War II, and millions of families lived with shortages, rationing, and uncertainty. Yet many Americans of that era carried a quiet calm, a sense of acceptance, and even inner peace that seems rare today. This was not because life was easy, but because people had learned how to live with difficulty. To understand why Americans in the 1940s could remain mentally steady despite poverty, we must first understand what they had already endured. The Great Depression of the 1930s had reshaped an entire generation. Jobs disappeared overnight, banks collapsed, families lost farms, homes, and savings. By 1940, hardship was not shocking anymore, it was familiar. People who survive long periods of uncertainty often develop emotional endurance. Fear loses its power when it becomes routine. Poverty in the 1940s was visible and shared. Entire neighborhoods were struggling together. Unlike today, where financial stress is often hidden and isolating, hardship then was collective. When everyone around you was wearing patched clothes, stretching meals, and repairing instead of replacing, there was little shame attached to having less. Comparison culture barely existed. There was no social media reminding people what they lacked. Life was measured against survival, not luxury. Another key reason for emotional stability was expectation. Americans in the 1940s did not expect comfort as a right. The idea that life should be easy, convenient, or pleasurable had not yet taken root. Difficulty was assumed. When hardship is expected, it is less destabilizing. People were not disappointed by life being hard. They believed that was simply how life worked. Family structure also played a powerful role. Most households were tightly bonded units. Extended families often lived nearby or under the same roof. Children, parents, and grandparents shared daily routines and responsibilities. Emotional support came not from professionals or institutions, but from proximity. People talked face to face. They processed fear and grief together. Loneliness existed, but isolation was rare. Faith was another stabilizing force. In the 1940s, religion was deeply woven into American life. Churches were not just places of worship, they were community centers, support systems, and moral anchors. Faith offered people a framework to understand suffering. Hardship was not meaningless, it was often viewed as a test, a duty, or a temporary season. This belief did not remove pain, but it gave pain a place to rest. Daily routines created psychological order. Even in poverty, days followed structure. People woke early, worked hard, shared meals, and rested at night. There were fewer distractions and fewer decisions to make. Life was simpler, though not easier. This predictability reduced anxiety. When life follows a rhythm, the mind feels safer, even when resources are limited. World War II also reshaped the emotional landscape. By the early 1940s, the nation was united by a shared purpose. Men went to war, women entered factories, rationing became a patriotic duty. Sacrifice was not personal, it was national. When suffering is tied to meaning, it becomes bearable. Americans believed their hardship served something larger than themselves. Scarcity also encouraged creativity and gratitude. Families reused, repaired, and repurposed everything. A single coat might last a decade. Meals were simple but valued. A warm home, a full stomach, or a letter from a loved one carried deep emotional weight. When less is available, more attention is given to what exists. This naturally cultivates gratitude. Children were raised differently. They were not shielded from hardship, they were included in it. They helped with work, understood financial limits, and learned responsibility early. This created resilience. Children did not expect the world to adapt to them. They adapted to the world. As adults, this made them less fragile in the face of difficulty. Entertainment was limited, but connection was strong. Radios brought news, music, and storytelling into homes. Families listened together. Neighbors gathered. Conversation filled the gaps where modern stimulation would later dominate. Minds were not constantly overwhelmed. Silence was normal. Reflection was common. Anxiety had space to settle instead of being constantly triggered. Mental health, as we understand it today, was rarely discussed, but emotional regulation was learned through experience. People were taught to endure quietly, to carry on, and to focus on duty rather than emotion. While this had its costs, it also built psychological toughness. People did not expect life to protect their feelings. Importantly, hope still existed. Despite poverty, Americans believed in progress. They trusted that effort mattered. Hard work, patience, and sacrifice were seen as investments in a better future. Even when the present was harsh, the future felt reachable. Hope is one of the strongest protections against despair. There was also less noise, no constant news cycles, no endless alerts, no pressure to react instantly. Information traveled slowly. This gave people time to emotionally process events instead of being overwhelmed by them. The mind had room to breathe. Looking back, it would be wrong to romanticize poverty. Life in the 1940s was hard, often unfair and physically exhausting. But emotional peace does not come from abundance alone. It comes from shared struggle, clear expectations, purpose, routine, and connection. Things that were abundant even when money was not. The calm seen in 1940s America was not the absence of pain, it was the presence of strength. People did not feel peaceful because life was gentle. They felt steady because they had learned how to stand inside difficulty without collapsing. In a modern world filled with comfort but fragile minds, the emotional resilience of 1940s Americans offers a powerful reminder. Peace is not built by having more. It is built by needing less, expecting less, and standing together when life demands everything.